Okay.
You're welcome to jump in anytime you can, ask any question about anything at any time. I mean, it's a very casual discussion. I'll tell you about the radio show and how it started and all. So I've been broadcasting now for over 10 years. The show is called Go Vegan with Bob Linden, as I mentioned it. GoVeganRadio.com is the website. It's the first vegan animal liberation program ever in mainstream media. And it was on Air America, so it also makes it the first major network vegan radio program, having broadcast on 26 radio stations at one point all across the country. And I used to be a program director in radio myself, and managed music radio stations around the country, so maybe that's why they trusted me with a vegan show, because I'm on Clear Channel radio stations, which is the largest corporate owner of radio, been on CBS stations, and all of this with the message that I really thought when I started the show 10 years ago it would last about 2 weeks, and the owners of the station, the management would hear it, and they'd say, we can't have this guy on, he's going to offend all of our other advertisers. We can't have a vegan show on, we won't be able to have McDevils and Wendy's and Kelly's Jr. or KFC Killing for Cash, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Up Chuck E. Cheese, and, all of these people, are going to call in and revolt, but it hasn't happened yet. So. And apparently ownership and management haven't listened yet. Actually, they really support the program. And Green 960 here in San Francisco had me speak at an event where meat was being served, actually.
Wow.
So it's really, growing up, I never would have imagined myself in the year 2011 discussing vegetarianism, veganism, activism like this. I grew up like everybody else eating meat my entire life. I won a hamburger eating contest when I was 16. But when I was in college, I was cooking on my own, and I was cooking chicken one night, and I happened to see the body. It was somebody, not something. It wasn't a round, nondescript food cutlet. It was someone. And just the thought occurred to me that if someone didn't volunteer to jump into the frying pan, as we in society make ourselves believe that the animals are here to feed us, they're here for our purposes. And I grew up in New York, so I like to use that as an excuse for not awakening even sooner, that to me, salami could have grown on a salami tree, peas could grow in a can for all I know. So, but this just this one night, it struck me that there was somebody in a frying pan in front of me. And so I decided at that point that I couldn't eat animals anymore. So I became the first vegetarian I ever knew. I was engaged to a woman whose father was a butcher, so it wasn't the best received news in the family. She's yelling at me, my future ex-mother-in-law is yelling at me, you're going to die if you eat like that. Are you crazy, But evidence is, I probably still will die, but it'll be a lot further into the future now that I've adopted this healthier lifestyle. And so I became the first vegetarian I knew, and then it took me quite a while before I was made aware by an animal rights organization of the cruelty that goes into dairy and egg production. Originally I thought, well, who gets hurt for a glass of milk or cheese or eggs? And yet the great vegan Cesar Chavez said that really if you're doing it for compassionate purposes, you get rid of the eggs and the dairy first. And so I became a vegan or a vegetarian for compassionate reasons. I didn't want animals suffering or being tortured or killed on my behalf. I didn't want to finance that. So when I found out about dairy and egg production, I had to become vegan and just not consume any animal products at all. thought that this was a quiet little personal decision that I was making, that I never explained to anyone, that I could eat a salad in a corner and just never talk to anybody about it. Little did I know that there was a vegan radio program in my future, and that this would be the cause of my life, and that my love for animals is what really motivates me to do everything now. I mean, and my background in radio has allowed me to produce this first show, which came about. I was actually creating some vegan festivals in the past as part of my animal rights activities. I started an event in Los Angeles called World Fest about in the year 2000. And in the course of promoting World Fest, this vegan festival, I went around to different radio stations. Good morning. And went around to different radio stations, and a producer at one of the stations said to me, well, I mean, you have a background in broadcasting and animal rights. Wouldn't it make sense for you to try to put together an animal rights radio show? Which I had not really considered, even though my entire career was in radio. I thought maybe at some point I'd do something in television or video where I could hold up, cow's milk, bad, don't drink it, soy milk, good, drink it. But the radio program made sense, and she said to me, we have available hours on KRLA on the weekend, and we charge for them, but go try to find some advertisers to cover the costs. So I got on the phone, and within 2 weeks I had enough advertising to put the program on the air to start it. And then I was faced with the challenge of what a vegan radio show would sound like. Good morning.
Morning.
The advertisers, like, who did you get to come forward?
Oh, there were people like Tofurkey and Veganays and some of the vegan food producers, some vegan restaurants in the Los Angeles area, Vegetarian Delight, people like that. So obviously I have a much smaller universe of potential advertisers, because all of the products advertised have to be vegan and cruelty-free, and the airwaves are owned by the products that are cruelty and cruelty. So it's kind of why I really didn't think the show would make it to 10 years, which it has now. So it's over 10 years on the air, and I was looking at, well, what does a vegan radio show sound like? And I don't know, the audience reaction has been pretty good to keep it on for 10 years. I was concerned because the subject is so morbid. I didn't want people to be slitting their wrists, or, be totally depressed from listening. So sometimes people tell me it's a comedy, so it's the most challenging job. A vegan show, there's no business like vegan show business. And the challenge of making comedy out of suffering in the world, well, you get to realize that human behavior is really capable of satire, with the way that our society is, how violence is totally embraced in all aspects of life, from food to clothing to entertainment, and nobody questions it. So, when I moved to Seattle many years ago, and an on-air person who worked for me said about my lifestyle. She was questioning, she'd never met a vegan before. She said, so let me get this right, you're against everything that's American? And I hadn't really thought of it that way before. I thought that I was for everything American, like the health of American children, or the health of the waterways in America, but when you think about it, vegans are the source of ridicule. It's just crazy how everything is turned around, how violence is glorified, how militarism is, that's where our entire budget goes, toward meat in the military. And then doing this vegan show has really been an education to me, because I can tie in veganism to any subject that's going on in the world. It all seems to relate. It relates to militarism. Well, it turns out, Tolstoy said that as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields. And then I investigate further, and I see a lecture that's on the website of the International Vegetarian Union that says, that talks about the effect of animal protein on human behavior and the aggressiveness that it causes with the calcium-phosphorus imbalance and the deposits left on the brain by meat, you know. Because I always talk metaphorically on the air, oh, you are what you eat, and you're ingesting all of this terror from the animals, and so that was metaphorical, and then science comes along and backs it up with a calcium-phosphorus imbalance. You know? And I had guests on my show from a prison. It was a pilot vegan program at Apple Valley Medium Correctional Prison. And they had 90% fewer behavioral problems with the vegan population than from the meat-eating population at that prison and compared to another prison nearby. So, I mean, we're eating violent food, and our society is all about violence. And it's subsidized. The meat industry is totally subsidized, so all our money goes to that. If I were elected president or king of the world, of course I would ban meat and dairy tomorrow immediately. And why wouldn't we pay people to take care of animals? You know, it's like if we're going to pay people to create bombs, we could easily have the priority, hey, take care of a couple of dogs, we'll pay you a living wage. It's, you know, but we see everything from such a violent perspective in the society. You know, it's just not questioned. We glorify those who drop the bombs, you know, and we don't really think much about the people who make peace. But today, in this festival, and actually World Fest that I started in the year 2000, all started in early October to commemorate Gandhi's birthday, which is today, October 2nd. So Gandhi was a vegan. He spoke out very strongly on vegetarian issues. His mother was a Jain. It's an ancient Indian religion based in compassion. It's really from which ahimsa comes, the concept of ahimsa. And the Jain precepts are very different from, you know, unfortunately, there seems to be this religious aspect of dominion you know, in this country that says we can use animals for any reason we want. People seem to have adopted that as part of their religion. God gave us the animals to do what we want, to eat, whatever. But yet those same people don't see in the beginning of the Bible, Genesis book 1, verse 29, that actually, well, God said be vegan. How do you ignore that part? You know, we're giving you every tree bearing fruit and every plant that has seed in it, this will be your food. So that seems very different from people saying, oh, use the animals to eat, to use. I always thought religion when I was growing up was kind of based in thou shalt not kill and do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which I think makes a lot more sense. And it's a lot more like the Jainism, from which Gandhi is an ancestor. The Jains said the purpose of living beings is to assist each other. I mean, you know, you can't get more beautiful than that. So I feel like the animals really need our help, and the heroes today are the people who speak out for veganism and animal liberation. Anybody who's vegan, all the people working for animals, are truly the heroes in the sense of Gandhi. It was Gandhi who said, the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. And apply that to our country right now, we need a lot of help. And Gandhi has inspired other peace activists. Martin Luther King Jr., Denis Kucinich is a vegan. Cesar Chavez was totally vegan, completely vegan, animal rights supporter. And Cindy Sheehan listens to my radio program and went vegan as a result of listening to my show. So, and she's been a guest on my show a number of times. If you go to goveganradio.com, I have hundreds of shows archived there. Really, you know, it's like a parade of heroes, the guests who have been on my show, people who do great work for the animals, you know. And I've had people say to me, oh, you care more about animals than you care about people, you know, all of that. But the fact is, if you do good things for animals, good things happen for people. If you don't eat animals, you don't get the heart disease, cancer, stroke, etc. All of those things. So it's Gandhi's birthday, and we celebrate that. And World Fest started in early October many years ago. I started that, and then came the vegan radio show. It went on the air. Surprisingly, it lasted more than the 2 weeks that I thought it would last. Just couldn't imagine radio stations allowing such a controversial show on the air that would insult all the other advertisers that would be on the air. Yet I've been pursued to be on the air by right-wing lunatic stations, right-wing stations that wanted my show on, and it was on Air America for a year. It was 26 radio stations there. It's self-syndicated. Back when I was a program director running radio stations, we considered ourselves public trustees who operated in the public interest. So I would have put my radio show on for free as a public service, this kind of information that can save people's lives and the animals and the planet. But with media consolidation, or meaty consolidation as it's happened, I have to purchase the airtime. So that's what it's been for 10.5 years. And it's inexplicable that it's on 10.5 years. Because I generally wake up Monday morning in a panic and a cold sweat. What have I gotten myself into, and how am I paying for it this week? And then out of panic, I seem to call enough people or companies or whatever, and a donation happens, or an advertiser. And so the miracle usually happens by about Wednesday, when I hear, oh, I have the money to pay for the show. And then I think, what's going to be on the show? I didn't have any guess. So then there's a panic for another day in the production of the show, and then I record the show. And then I have to send it electronically to an editor. So there's always the panic of how it goes wrong in the electronic editing process. So it takes up a full week, and usually by Friday night I'm ready to collapse from just this 1 hour little radio program. I used to go to radio stations to record it every week, and I'm on the activist budget, so the cars I drive are often the donated, usually the old Fords in the family. It's never like a Honda or Toyota, so it's the old Ford that's about to explode. And they usually do explode just as I'm getting to the radio station, smoke coming out, I get out and do the show. So something, the animals apparently want this show to go on, so it's going on for 10.5 years. I don't know how I'm paying for it next week, but tomorrow morning I'll wake up in that panic and wonder what happens there. So I guess I'm an animal rights activist, basically, who, that's the motivation for the show. It's really love for animals, and I just hope to represent their position as much as possible. If anybody has any complaints about the show, I don't really mind as long as I feel like the animals wouldn't be complaining, So I just got a letter the other day. Letter came in from a listener on Green 960 who said, I'm turning off your show. Your show is dripping with moral superiority. I can't listen to this. And I just came to understand, okay, well, it's true. Being a vegan is the morally superior lifestyle. So he can either be comfortable, uncomfortable with it and say, ooh, if I really think about it, I'm going to have to change. Or he can turn it off, and say, okay, well, there's that. And I think that is something that makes other people uncomfortable a bit, about dealing with vegans is, the issue of, you have to examine the morality behind it and may have to make changes or would prefer to ignore it, So when I was working at that radio station in Seattle, they'd often have the party platters there, or catering or whatever. And, I'd come around the corner and the business manager's there. And she has a piece of salami in her hand, and she sees me and she goes, it's like, just, if I can make just one person feel guilty about, eating a cadaver every day, I've done my part. So, and the program actually, surprisingly, has done very well in ratings. It's always been one of the top-rated programs on the stations that run it. It can't just be vegans listening. And that's really why I'm so dedicated to the show being on the air, is that it is outreach to people who know nothing about veganism, don't want to know anything about it, and they're listening to a show about Obama, healthcare, Afghanistan, whatever. On comes a vegan radio show, and I think just the curiosity of it keeps them listening. Just the curiosity about the truth. You don't hear the truth in the media at all. I ran on Air America, which is a liberal radio station, so they're complaining about everything: global warming, war, healthcare costs, all of those things. And I'm a show that has the solution to all of those things, and I let them know it too. So it's actually hitting them with the truth that I think seems so entertaining, that they are eating a decomposing cadaver. If they want to consider what meat is, the brainwashing brainwashing starts at a young age with McDevils and the playground and the toys and come on in and the clown. How can there be anything wrong with that, right? I mean, it's all, I grew up, in school in New York. Every afternoon they gave us cow's milk and cookies. So what could be wrong with cow's milk? I never thought, well, I'm not a baby cow. Why am I, and it's basically state-sponsored disease promotion, because so many in society are lactose intolerant. Dr. Milton Mills spoke here yesterday, and he and the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine actually challenged the USDA on the racist bias of its dietary guidelines. So it's really interesting how all of this is just so accepted, and then on comes a vegan radio show that says, everything you're doing is wrong, everything your parents did, wrong. So it becomes quite entertaining, I think, for people, and quite shocking. When people hear that meat and dairy are responsible for 51% of all greenhouse gas emissions. I never think about that. I never, and they don't hear about it. So the show's been interesting. It runs on Green 960 Sunday afternoons at 3 p.m. It also runs in Portland right now on a progressive talk station there. Each of those stations cost $400 a week for me to put on the air. So right now I'm looking at, I have to come up with $800, $1,000 a week to put those two shows on the air. When it was on Air America, I had to come up with $3,000 a week to be on that network. And I want to have to come up with more money, because there are radio stations all around the country who actually want to run the show. WWRL in New York, the radio station in Chicago, WCPT, wants to run it after the Ariana Huffington show there. They just really support it, and this is corporate radio. And like I said, the real importance of this is the outreach in the mainstream media. That somebody isn't Googling vegan to find Go Vegan with Bob Linden. It's just, it comes on, it's a show out of the blue. They have a show on before about healthcare costs. Well, I have, I'm really amazed by the information, and it's funny because when I first started the show, potential advertisers said to me, well, after you do 2 or 3 shows, what is there to talk about? It's like, I haven't gotten to anything yet. That's my frustration, is the hour ends and it's like, I haven't talked about anything yet. There's just so much to talk about. Lately, my involvement has been related to the circus. I was at a protest in Anaheim when the circus was there, and we saw one of the elephants. We saw them loading onto the railroad car, and we were there, and as Sarah was making it up to the top, she lost her footing, toppled down off the ramp, and fell to the ground. Well, it becomes, it's an image that keeps playing over and over in my mind, so that became important to me to try to help Sarah find out that she's 54 years old and has been a slave of Ringling Brothers for 43 years. And as they walk her to the railroad car, all the people next to her have the bull hook, you know, the big wooden stick hook on the end, and that's their training. And it kind of tears my insides out, all of this, you know. You know, there are certain images I see that keep inspiring me to keep going on and wanting just to tell people, because I think when people hear about these things, they make changes. But if they don't hear about them, they never know. What, there's an alternative lifestyle, like not eating meat, you know? I mean, it's amazing. I was living at a dog sanctuary about a year or so ago, and I injured my hand, and it became infected, and I had to seek medical help. And they take all my numbers, you know, the blood pressure, pulse, you know, all of those things were like just fantastic, you know. And I've been vegan now for 27 years. And the nurse says to me, "Man, I wish I had your numbers. I mean, this is incredible." So I said, "Well, you can have my numbers. Just, you know, like, go vegan, you know." He said, "What? And give up my meat?" You know? So it's like, well, do you want to have the numbers or not? And the thing is, since I became vegan 27 years ago, I mean, the options are there. You don't even miss meat. I mean, if you want burgers, hot dogs, ice cream, whatever. I mean, it's just all there. So it's an interesting education I have in all of this, and to see where I stand on certain issues. And where I am right now is, we went to the, and much of what you're hearing today is part of a talk I gave at the Animal Rights Conference recently. My talk was condemned officially by the Animal Rights Conference because I was critical of, I was critical of the Humane Society of the United States in my talk, HSUS. So right after I finished my talk, just to prepare you if anybody's here from HSUS, walk out now in protest. So I gave the talk, and then after that, Alex Hershaft said, "Well, I must officially condemn your talk for, you know, we don't criticize other organizations, you know." I said, "Well, I don't regard HSUS as anything to do with animal rights. I consider it a part, actually, of the meat industry, so I don't know why you're condemning it." But what I was very upset with Prop 2. I wasn't somebody who was able to support Prop 2. And, you know, I'm just wondering about the state of animal rights and animal activism in attending the Animal Rights Conference. The feeling that I get is that vegans, they just feel like, oh, it's so hard to convince people to go vegan. It's just, how do we, you know, I mean, we'll never have a vegan world. It's just, it's too hard, it's too much, you know. But, I mean, people are willing, you know, to give chickens a little more space, right? So a chicken who has 8.5 inches by, you know, 11 inches of space, I mean, if we have some law that goes in that gives them a little more space, people can go for that, right? You know, we're not saying don't eat chickens. You know, so I see this campaign out there, prevent animal cruelty, you know, to farm animals. And so, and HSUS wanted me to support it at the time. I kept getting phone calls from Paul Shapiro. "Come on, you know, get behind Prop 2, you know, so that we can promote it on your radio show and bring even more money into HSUS." Which I actually call the Humanely About the Money Society of the United States. So I look at this campaign, it says, prevent animal cruelty. And I look at that and I say, but what are you preventing? Basically, it's the room going from this to about that, okay. Every female bird is still debeaked. Debeaking, I mean, their beak is their way around the world. It's like cutting off their face. Okay, so we're still cutting off her face. All the male chicks are still all getting ground a lot, you know, ground up at a day of age or suffocated or whatever, you know. Oh, that doesn't stop animal cruelty. The females, still, they're crammed in sheds, 40,000, 50,000, you know, so many thousands of birds and all of that. So none of these birds will ever know that they have a better life because of Prop 2, because they will all have a 100% miserable life. They'll never say, wow, it could have been worse, you know? And one of those images I have in my head, like Sarah falling off the plank, I just saw a picture of a chicken in a cage, you know, like in the corner, like just, you know, no escape, no escape. And it's really unbearable to me to think of that. What is her escape? How can we help her escape? Prop 2 doesn't help any chicken escape. The only thing that does is veganism. The only thing that does is cutting the demand, the consumer demand. Because we haven't been able to ban meat yet. We banned fur in West Hollywood, the sale of fur in West Hollywood a couple of weeks ago, so we voted on that. We see there's the potential for that. We banned plastic bags in grocery stores, you know. So, you know, I'm getting behind a little campaign to ban meat as part of what I think that I want to inspire vegans, or ask vegans, I mean, if anybody's going to promote a vegan world, it has to be vegans. We can't ask somebody else to do it. Once we become a vegan, it's our job to convince other people to be vegan, not to eat a certain kind of chicken or, you know, something that has a stamp of approval of, you know, cage-free, free-range, all meaningless things, you know. I mean, I have a lot of clothing that has vegan on it, you know. People always say, all right, vegan, you know. So I say, oh, well, you must be vegan too, right? No, but I eat the proper meat, you know. A campaign like Prop 2 that says prevent animal cruelty, well, the public sees that, people voted it in, the chickens have it fine. So I'll just eat, you know, cage-free chicken. So I've had this argument with HSUS. HSUS has, its hero is Wolfgang Puck. You know, they can't find a vegan chef. Wolfgang Puck, you look at his menu, veal is at the top of the menu, lobster, all of, you know, so thinking, I don't quite understand, you know, what HSUS is doing. HSUS is pals with Michael Vick, rehabilitating his image, you know. HSUS said Michael Vick's dogs should all be killed. You know, they couldn't be rehabilitated, but Michael Vick can, you know, at a certain price. The Philadelphia Eagles gave at least $50,000 to HSUS for that. I see HSUS on TV, they talk about the egg issue, but they never say, you know, you do have one option, not to eat eggs at all. I never heard that. And then the next sentence is, buy from a responsible breeder. This is on Oprah. So I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure I understand this HSUS, which seems to control the animal industry, animal advocacy, because it has $120 million. It has a name that's very deceptive. Every night on TV, you see all the puppies and kittens, and you go, oh my God, I have to write a check. They don't run any shelters, you know. They didn't support Nathan Winograd in some movements toward no-kill, and yet everybody flocks to HSUS, all the animal people, all my friends collecting signatures for Prop 2. And they were told in the signature collection process, don't mention anything about veganism. So this is a campaign to stop cruelty to animals on the farm, and they said don't mention anything about veganism. So then I have to say, I'm not in the same movement as HSUS. I don't think they are in the movement. I don't know, like, how many things do they have to do before you say, like, we are not they are not we, you know? I mean, it's like, okay, if I, as a vegan radio show host, said, my favorite chef is Wolfgang Puck, you know? I mean, I don't know what I could get away with. Can I do a promotion with Iams Dog Food, a meat dog food that experiments on animals, that's a subsidiary of Procter & Gamble, which is the biggest experimenter on animals? HSUS does it, you know, I mean, so I probably resent that it gets $120 million, and you can listen on my website, September 5th, 2009, to an interview with Wayne Pacelli. So in his own words, he says, we're not an animal rights organization, they don't promote veganism. He actually boasts that a number of members on the board aren't even vegetarian. So, and he said HSUS is not against all hunting, zoos, circuses. So it gets a little upsetting to me when HSUS is in a position to define the animal rights movement and to say what's practical, what's possible. And so I think HSUS is part of the problem in that it's not inspiring people to say, your job as a vegan is to talk to other people about being vegan. Who else is going to create a vegan world if not vegans? We can't, and the world can't wait. In terms of environmentally, I mean, global warming it's out of control now. I know Governor Rick Perry in Texas said he can't see any evidence of it. Apparently he didn't come out his front door in Austin because cities all across Texas were just setting record high temperatures. The state is on fire, and there's a drought. He had blindfolds on because there's no doubt about global warming, and that we have the ice is melting, snow caps melting in the Himalayas, the water that's a source for billions of people, it's drying up. Because apparently Mother Earth isn't too happy about our meat and dairy consumption either, which is the main cause of global warming. As I said, 51% of all greenhouse gas emissions. If carbon is a concern, but carbon is less of a concern because really the way to address global warming is methane. Methane, greatest source of methane is cows, so dairy cows, beef. That's the only way to cycle, to really address global warming is to cycle the methane out of the environment. And methane is a major concern, so we have to look at veganism as being what can save the world. We're concerned about deforestation, soil erosion. An acre of land can produce 165 pounds of beef, but 20,000 pounds of potatoes. So it's the source of world hunger, poverty, meat and dairy. So we have to address meat and dairy as the enemies that they are, not necessarily, the people who are involved with them have all been brainwashed to think that it's okay to eat a rotting corpse. I'll have another glass of trans-species mammary secretion. Sure, why not? Yet nobody considers what is in that glass of cow's milk intended for the baby cow. Blood, pus, tuberculosis, leukemia, antibiotics. Really, any problem that we have can be traced to meat and dairy. And every issue is really related. We just looked at the death penalty, by the way. Everybody was concerned about the death penalty. Perhaps a gentleman was an innocent man just executed in Atlanta. I had Ed Asner on my show many years ago, TV star, movie star. He was participating in Great American Meetup, but he wasn't vegan himself. But he's been an activist all these years. And I said, so Ed, what's the issue that really concerns you? What's on your mind? And he said, it's the death penalty. It's just totally wrong. And I said, so Ed, did you ever think that every chicken, every animal who gets eaten is born into the death penalty? Totally innocent, they committed no crime, but suddenly they're in prison and they can only look forward to the death penalty. And his eyes lit up, and it really rang a chord with him. And the next day his office called me and they wanted recommendations on vegan restaurants all around where his office was. So, for all social justice issues, if we look at oppression of females, look no further than dairy and egg production. It's just tied into everything. So all major issues, resource depletion, our problems with energy, all of that would be solved by everybody going vegan, eating, and all the food is delicious. I was preparing some material for today because I've gotten involved. So my issue is to try to promote vegan animal liberation activism. I'm trying to provide activities so that when one feels like, oh, I want to do something for HSUS to help animals, that there's an alternative, that somebody could actually make a choice and say, no, I'm not going to collect signatures for a campaign that says, don't mention veganism 700,000 times, So I want to I just kind of point out that there is activism that can be done alternatively, because HSUS has just come to an agreement with the egg industry. And it always used to complain how, oh, the egg industry is complaining about what we're doing, so it must be right, animal activists, send us more money. Yet now the egg industry is saying, wow, this is such an exciting time to be in egg production, because while Prop 2 was maybe more room for chickens in 2015, maybe more room, going from this to about that. Maybe more room, because I don't believe Prop 2 will ever help any bird at all, ever. The state of California doesn't have the budget to hire chicken welfare inspectors. So will you have an army of chicken welfare inspectors going around with tape measures going, oh no, this bird only has 8.5 by 11 instead of 12 inches by 12 inches in here, and then what would the fine be, and would it really hurt the dairy industry, So it has to really be cutting down the demand. Now, after Prop 2, HSUS's agreement with the United Egg Producers is what I call furniture for chickens in 18 years. So I'm attempting to define where I am in the movement, basically with vegan animal liberation activism versus furniture for chickens in 18 years. I'm asking people not to work for furniture for chickens in 18 years, but to work for a vegan world now. And the agreement with HSUS and the egg producers seems to be for what are called enriched cages. Enriched cages are not recognized as humane by anyone. There was supposed to be a ban on cages in Europe that was to go into effect, but the egg producers there complained. So the solution, the compromise, enriched cages, which are not humane. So now this agreement with United Egg Producers, enriched cages, and Karen Davis opposes this. Karen Davis of United Poultry Concerns, somebody who's very concerned about chickens. I've spoken with her over the years. She was a little concerned about these campaigns anyway. I talked to her about Prop 2. But she definitely opposes this agreement with HSUS and the United Egg Producers for furniture for chickens in 18 years. So in 18 years, chickens are supposed to have a perch in the cage. Of course, now with the perch in the cage, chickens going on that will be covered with excrement in no time. So therefore, we have to have chicken cage cleaners put into this budget. That will never happen. And they're supposed to get either some wood shavings or some sand so they can peck around and scratch around. I don't know if it's to explore nature or to take a bath or whatever the purpose is. But they're still indoors. And so when they scratch around in the sand, it'll just become a cloudier environment with the ammonia and all of that. It'll just become a more toxic environment. And yet this will be sold to the public as progress, and there will be no progress. So instead I say, let us get involved with vegan animal liberation activism. I see that there's a campaign that's starting in France that I have on one of the sheets here. It's the campaign to abolish meat. Of course it sounds, wow, isn't that crazy to abolish meat? But we've abolished murder, we've abolished rape, we can abolish meat if people actually understand that meat is murder, that meat is rape. And I used the word rape. I wrote a little bit to the Vegetarian Society of the UK. I like to encourage vegetarians, people who consider themselves vegetarians, but who continue to consume animal products, such as dairy and eggs, to actually become the true vegetarians and to go vegan. If a vegetarian would ask him or herself the reason that he or she became vegetarian, it would either be related to animal suffering, health, or the environment. And you really accomplish nothing by continuing to consume animal products. And I was pointing that out to the Vegetarian Society in the UK, and somebody wrote back and said, oh, Mr. Linden, you use such emotive words, you say rape, and it's just too much, So I had to write back and say, well, when the cow is impregnated, The dairy industry does it on what it calls a rape rack. So if you have problems with the word rape, I mean, I guess you have to take it up with the dairy industry. But if you have problems with the actual rape itself, then you have to stop drinking milk. You also have to recognize that your drinking milk causes veal and hamburgers. So, you know, first the mother is raped, the baby is kidnapped, the baby becomes veal at Wolfgang Puck's restaurant. That's the, you know, there's the irony of this. You can see Wayne Baselli and Wolfgang Puck sitting together on a YouTube video. And HSUS has argued with me because they've said, well, we hear you're saying some, you know, critical things about us. I said, well, I mean, explain to me how Wolfgang Puck can be your hero. There's no vegan chef. I mean, if they come here today, you know, they'd find a million people who could better represent the cause. So the argument to me went, well, Wolfgang Puck, because on this video, Wolfgang Puck says, well, okay, so I don't do foie gras anymore, but my customers have to have something, so now I can give them cage-free chicken livers, you know, pate, cage-free chicken liver pate. And we're supposed to feel good about that, but my heart goes out to the cage-free chicken whose liver becomes the pate. What about her? And I've gotten that argument twice, you know, Paul Shapiro of HSUS and Dr. Michael Greger, who also made that same argument to me. And I said, well, okay, to the duck, you know, who would be tortured for foie gras, yeah, I think she would prefer cage-free chicken liver pate. But if you ask the chicken, I think the chicken would say, maybe foie gras is a better choice. But if you ask both the duck and the chicken, they would both say, everyone should go vegan. And that is the only key to it. And with a Prop 2, suddenly the public feels it's okay, there's humane meat, there's humane milk, there's humane whatever. And there isn't, you know? So again, none of the truth gets out in society. So it's left up to a vegan radio show. So what can we do for our vegan animal liberation activism? You can help with this radio show. And I have a number of options. But for example, as I said, I have to pay for the airtime on my show. And right now I can afford to be on in San Francisco, barely afford. Because of my animal activism, I take my megaphone out. Oh, my megaphone. So, you know, I mean, I take my megaphone out to the circus to protest on behalf of Sarah. I take it to UCLA to protest vivisection. I take it to McDonald's to protest. So, in addition to helping my radio show, you can get a megaphone and go to your nearby McDonald's. You can see a YouTube video. I'm on there. People send that around and they think it's a pretty cool thing to do. You know, just recognize Ronald McDonald for the #1 terrorist that he is, and take it out there. Let parents know that they're putting their children on the path to premature death. You know, parents, what are you doing? You know. So my radio show. Okay. So I have to pay $400 in San Francisco every week and $400 in Portland. That's $800 a week. So anyone interested in becoming involved with vegan animal liberation activism could help generate advertising for the radio program and could help generate donations for the radio program. It's a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible. And as I said, the show, while it's on now in those 2 cities, there are radio stations willing to run it in New York, Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles also. I feel this moral obligation to the animals to get the show on. Where, I mean, corporate radio, the largest owner of corporate radio stations, is allowing a vegan show on. I have the moral obligation to the animals to make it happen, to reach as many people as possible with the vegan message, because I think that's my job as a vegan, is to tell everybody about being vegan. I think that's really the job of vegans, is not to be shy. You know, we hate to put ourselves on other people at the grocery store line or whatever. But who are we to deprive people of the information that could save their lives? Who are we to deprive people of the information that could save their children just because, you know, we shouldn't prejudge them, you know? I won a hamburger eating contest I host a vegan talk show. I wish somebody would have given me this information a lot earlier in my life. You know, I wish somebody could have showed me the cruelty. And you can take videos out. That's part of vegan animal liberation activism. I used to take Meet Your Meat and put it on a screen. We went to the Santa Monica Promenade, you know, showed it to people there. That's their first contact with the origins of their food ever. And you watch the expressions on their faces, and some of them will say, you know, I don't think I can eat another hamburger again. And then others, you know, will ridicule and heckle and all of that, which is a natural response, but give them a while to think about it. You know, you're kind of shocking their system a little bit. And again, you're saying, yeah, your mother wasn't quite right with everything she fed you, that's true. But she didn't know better. We really know now the connections of meat and dairy to heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, osteoporosis, all of these problems. And one of the things I did with my radio show, or coordination with it, I produced an event called Soul Food for Thought that took place in San Francisco. It was vegan outreach to people of color. It was co-hosted by John Sally and Tracy Bingham. It was just a great night of music and speakers, African dance, reggae, jazz, and two really great speakers, Dr. Milton Mills, who spoke here last night, and Dr. Antenaroba from Ethiopia. He's with the International Fund for Africa. And Dr. Roba spoke about how he visited the slave dungeons in West Africa, and how today's factory farms remind him of the same thing. Really very strong comparison to here. Dr. Milton Mills talked about the food that African Americans eat today. He says it's slave food, it's food off the plantation, and that there are critical health problems in the African American community because of what's eaten today. We need to get this truth out also. So there's Soul Food for Thought. That cost about $50,000 to produce when we did it here. Who wants to help raise money? Who wants to go to Bank of America or Wells Fargo or any entity that has money who wants to look good in the community and, you know, give us money to put on this production? You know, I mean, I want to put it on at the Apollo Theater in New York. I want to put it on in Washington, D.C. at the Linden Theater. I want to do it in L.A. I mean, this is all vegan animal liberation activism versus furniture for chickens in 18 years. You know, it's outreach to people. You know, I have friends who we were going around to the circus protest. They're Latina. They did not know that Cesar Chavez was totally vegan, and they are just amazed and thrilled, and you know, they're ready to start an organization. What is it? Chicana Vegana como Cesar Chavez. And you know, I've spoken at Cesar Chavez events in San Francisco and LA. Cesar Chavez took as much pride in converting people to veganism as he did to trade unionism, but that aspect of his life isn't known. So if Cesar Chavez were at one of the events celebrating his life, he wouldn't be able to eat there. You know, there wouldn't be any food for him there. But this is another opportunity to take someone who was a hero to the community and point out that he was a vegan animal rights activist, and to reach out in Spanish. We have to reach as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. Not only planet Earth can't afford it, but our medical expenses can't afford it. What's the name of the supervisor? It's Ross Mercarami? Is that, am I getting that right? He's the one who initiated the ban on plastic bags. And I spoke to him recently and I said, let's work on something really harmful, like a ban on meat, you know, which upon hearing me the second time made more sense than the first. Of course, you ridicule it the first time. A ban on meat, you know, that's, what a joke. Well, a ban on plastic bags could have been a joke. A ban on fur in West Hollywood could have been a joke. But even if we don't ban meat, it's an educational process to have a campaign to ban meat. Like I said, there's a campaign now to abolish meat that started in France. It's the meet-abolish.org. So there's that. And I want to approach Ross. He said, well, come to me with some of the facts that might be convincing. And so it's taken me forever to try to put together what I thought would be the basis for what I would present to him. And I'm really just actually looking at it for the first time today because I had to have volunteers help me on getting this information together. I wanted to know the cost to San Francisco, for example, of heart disease or cancer or stroke. Nobody has this information. You call the Heart Association, oh, that's a good question. We don't know. It's like, you never thought of this? No. Yeah. None of the associations had the information, So, so I had a friend of mine put some time into it. And so it looks like the annual cost of heart disease in the U.S. itself right now, per year, is $316 billion in the U.S. Now, you see, Bill Clinton has just gone kind of vegan, depending upon the interview you hear, where he says he's vegan, but then sometimes I don't know if he eats fish or he still eats the bite of turkey on Thanksgiving, as he said on the interview. But anyway, I'm going to send him a turkey anyway, so he doesn't have to have a bite of turkey on Thanksgiving. So he has these doctors, T. Colin Campbell, who's speaking here later today, and Caldwell Esselstyn, who's been a guest on my show a number of times also. And Dr. Esselstyn basically brings people back from the dead. They're heart patients who they're kind of on the way out, and many of them stay here as a result of seeing Dr. Esselstyn, who says that heart disease is preventable and reversible, but nobody has to have heart disease. If it's preventable, well, we just saved $316 billion in this country every year if we were to go vegan. 316 billion, and that's estimated to go like to 500 billion in the not too distant future. Look at all the wars we could have. We could have plenty of money for wars if we were. I don't mean that. If we were all vegan, we wouldn't want wars. We wouldn't be fighting over the resources that we do with wars, like oil. Oil. We're in Iraq for oil. A gallon of gasoline per pound of beef. The average American has 70 pounds of beef per year. 300 million Americans. We're in Iraq for people's hamburgers. So that's heart disease in this country. And so in the Bay Area, heart disease costs a little over $7 billion a year that could be saved. We have budget deficits, we have all sorts of things going on where we can't afford anything. And look at the cost of just heart disease in the Bay Area. So, and about half $500 million in San Francisco itself. So, diabetes, for example, in the Bay Area, that costs about $5 billion. I mean, it just goes down and down. With the meat and dairy related diseases here, meaning heart disease, cancer, stroke, osteoporosis, all of that, it looks like we would save about $20 billion a year in the Bay Area and over $2 billion a year in San Francisco itself if we were a vegan population. And I don't know, that seems to be pretty convincing evidence right there. Now, a vegan requires 10,000 gallons of water to grow his or her food in a year, and a meat eater needs 320,000 gallons. So each vegan here has saved 310,000 gallons of water per year over a meat eater. And 32 vegans can be fed to one meat eater as relates to water. So if we, in the Bay Area, were to go vegan and we wanted to save some water, well, let's see. So in the Bay Area, we would save 22 billion gallons of water per year with the vegan population. So, I mean, it's a matter of life and death. I mean, we're killing animals for no reason. I mean, it's not healthy to eat them. Why would we continue to kill animals just to grow tumors and destroy the environment? I mean, it makes no sense. So somewhere along the line, the truth and sense have to come through. And I think it comes with a campaign to abolish meat. You know, and people need to know. I mean, you know, if they saw a baby calf or piglets in front of a store, you know, petting zoo, whatever, they'd be petting them and loving them and whatever, and then they walk away and go in the store and they buy a ham sandwich. You know, I mean, people need to know of the cruelty that they're subsidizing. Because if anything that happened to animals were to take place on the street, I mean, people would run to their defense or call the police. I mean, any of the processes to turn an animal into food or an experiment. Look at all the millions of animals in animal experimentation in our major universities that are actually, you know, supposed to be credible institutions when it comes to knowledge. Yet they're dealing with fraudulent science when they're using vivisection. And millions of animals are losing their lives in experimentation. And billions of dollars are being wasted, all to find cures to diseases caused by the consumption of meat and dairy. So, I mean, everybody wins in a vegan world, but we can't be vegans who say, it's too hard, or it'll never happen. We have to make it happen. We have to make it happen. I know from experience of doing a vegan radio show, people hear this information and they go vegan. It happens all the time. But they have to hear this information. They have to know it's available. They have to know that when they see Stop Animal Cruelty, it's going vegan. It's not trying to get a chicken this much more room in a cage somewhere and then saying, oh, cage-free, free range, whatever. We can't, I feel uncomfortable when vegans align themselves, become allies with the meat industry, the way that HSUS has done. Because no meat should be acceptable. Meat is murder, no meat is humane. And now they talk about humane killing. So they talk about, you know, humane slaughter. And we're even getting that there's humane ways to kill seals for fur now. So it's a great, fun word that gets, you know, out there and makes everything okay when it's not okay. There's no humane meat, no humane eggs. It just makes no sense. But we look for these fun words to rationalize and cover over everything. Like we have flexitarian. Flexitarian, it sounds so flexible and you know, cheerful. You know, it's a flexitarian. I'll be flexible. Some days I'll eat products that are, you know, the result of rape and murder. Other days maybe I'll eat vegan food. That's flexible. Omnivore. Oh, yeah, vegan food, I can eat some of that. But I eat everything, so bring on the carcasses, bring on, you know, the body parts. It's a society eating body parts, cadavers, corpses that are rotting. It's really very bizarre. It's kind of a bizarre society that can only be saved by vegans. I mean, it's up to us. A couple of years ago, I received an award from the Supreme Master Qinghai International Association. It's called the Shining World Hero Award. And I just couldn't understand why I was getting this award, you know, on this little radio show. But it did occur to me that, and they brought it to my attention, that being vegan is the most noble lifestyle that there is. And asking others to be vegan is a very noble occupation. It's really, you know, we're saving lives. You know, the animals, humans, you know, not human animals, and the planet. So it's our job to promote veganism, and we are right, you know. I mean, because it's not killing and it's not torturing.
What percentage of people in the U.S. are vegan, and has it been increasing each year?
I think it has. It is. I mean, you see estimates like of about 5% of the population being vegetarian. So maybe you might have 1 or 2% who are vegan. But it is growing. Kids are into it. They understand. The younger generation, if we can get to them, if we can get to high school students, if we can get to college-age people, I mean, it really does, you know, ring a chord with them. You know, it's being recognized. When I first started doing my radio show, I mean, people were asking me what the word is. But now I've seen it used in commercials for Jack in the Box. Jack in the Box had a commercial where it had a football game between the Jack in the Box carnivores and the LA vegans. So, I mean, that, you know, that's Jack in the Box using the word vegan. And in the commercial, by the way, the carnivores, of course, won the game, but they cheated. You know, if anybody, they pushed the vegans just to show the morality was still intact for us there. And also Burger King put up a billboard with some meaty sandwich or something, and it said, you know, just when you were thinking about going vegan, as if, you know, the dead carcass on the bread were supposed to be very appetizing.
That's an actual billboard?
Yeah. Just when you thought you were going vegan, and then, you know, their sandwich that's supposed to be so appetizing, you know. But an animal isn't appetizing. When you see a cow or a pig, you don't salivate. You know, I mean, it's all through the hiding process. Now we salivate. Oh, when we go to the produce section, you know, we can tell what's real food. The animals have to be disguised to be what's considered food. Do a lot of grinding, a lot of sauces, a lot of everything, you know. Gotta get those feathers out, you know, get the hair off, all of that stuff. So, and by the way, I'm sorry to inform you, if you're a vegan, that your bagels may not be vegan. Now that's my latest problem. I just found out that many bagels have feathers. Feathers in bagels. It is. Can you be safe anywhere? There's this dough conditioner that's put in a lot of products, commercial pizza, and bagels also. So it's a dough conditioner. It's called L-cysteine, I think is the adjective. So bagels have feathers. People have hair, you know, their hair. Steven Tyler, people now they have feathers in their hair, which is another outgrowth of a cruel industry that roosters are suffering. You know, so I mean, it's just really incredible how it's just okay to do what we want with an innocent being, you know. It's like, we want to decorate ourselves, so kill some roosters. Our feathers will look good in our hair. You know, I mean, just this lack of concern for other life is really, really challenging, you know. I mean, our society, God put them here for us to use or whatever, you know. I could go back to talking about the Jains before, the Jain monks, who would sweep in front of them because they don't want to step on any creatures, you know, and we'd ask them, oh, why are you so concerned? And it's like, well, maybe if we don't use, use raid or kill insects, you know, maybe we won't use napalm, you know, in Vietnam. We respect all life. Maybe we'll actually respect human life, which seems to be cheapened in the meat-eating process also. I mean, flesh is flesh. There's a pig farmer in Canada who also happened to be a serial killer of women, who's in jail now. But he was mixing the flesh. Nobody knew the difference. He was mixing the flesh from women and pigs, marketing it, and nobody knew the difference. Flesh is flesh.
Do you have a website, and are you on Facebook?
Yes. So my website is goveganradio.com. I'm on Facebook. It's Bob Linden, Bob L-I-N-D-E-N. And so let's see. So in terms of, again, continuing with the vegan, animal liberation, activism that we can do as an alternative to working for furniture for chickens in 18 years. So again, with my radio show, I mentioned I'm trying to get on in a number of cities, and it just costs the money to do it. As I said, it's $400 a week in San Francisco, $400 a week in Portland. Those are the two cities running my show right now. It also is on iTunes. So New York wants to charge me about $1,200 per week for an hour there. Los Angeles, again, is $1,200 a week. Chicago is $600 a week. Seattle, $500. I want to have to pay this. I want to reach as many people as possible with the vegan message. When I use the megaphone, you know, they say, sometimes they say, get a life, get a job, whatever. You know. But with the microphone, there's a certain credibility that comes from the radio. I can say the very same thing in the street, but on the radio, did you hear what the guy said on the radio? Meat and dairy cause global warming. You know, so I take that, you know. And if there were 100 vegan radio shows, you know, that would be great. But this is it. So this is our way of reaching through mainstream media. And then through the radio show and that involvement, we're able to create other events. Like I said, I created World Fest before my radio show in San Francisco. But I've created vegan festivals. I mentioned Soul Food for Thought. I did an animal rights film festival at Fort Mason a couple of years ago. I mean, all of these things to engage the public. I mean, it's just so important that we just keep reaching people. And that's what I'm about. My background was in media. I was in radio for 30 years, and you know, but really, right now it's all dedication to animal issues. What can I do for the animals? And to me, the best thing that can be done is to invite people to go vegan, as many people as possible. I have on this sheet here, it's a bit much to read, so I won't do that. I also thought, well, if anything, if you're looking for something to do in spare time, we can hang things on people's doors, going door to door. Religions have done it forever, knocking on the doors or whatever. Instead of doing something for HSUS to try to get a poop-covered purge in 18 years. So I kind of wrote out a little thing that could go on a handout, you know, to neighbors, that you could go knock on doors or just put on the doorknobs, you know. Hi neighbors, we're just here to give you good news about being vegan, that your children don't have to have diabetes, you know, things along those lines. Just ways of reaching out and communicating with the public. So I'm going to go to that supervisor in San Francisco with these arguments. I mean, I didn't even realize until I saw this. I had, you know, somebody who was volunteering to help me put all of this together. And I think it's really quite amazing that, well, in California, related to all those health diseases, heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, etc., we would save 11.2 California. So it looks like we would save maybe $100 billion a year. Total cost. Yeah, so we would save a little over $100 billion a year in healthcare costs if we had a vegan population. Well, what's the state deficit? What's the budget deficit? Is it 10, 15 billion? There goes the deficit. We have money for everything. We can have a happy society. We have resources. We can feed everyone. The animals don't suffer. And then I think people, when they go vegan, they do become more compassionate. I see even the people who've become vegan for health reasons and never really had concerns about animals are suddenly out there with a picket sign at UCSF against vivisection. So,
I have an idea. Why don't you call Michelle Obama, and since she's interested in healthy food, and say, hey, you know, your husband might be interested in this. It would be a good time to call her, wouldn't it?
well, sure. I mean, Obama is on YouTube and addressed veganism and acknowledged the benefits of it. But he still goes to cheap hamburger joints, and he himself, you see him on 60 Minutes, and he's making food for his daughters. He's giving them cheese, you know? I mean, like, cheese for people of color, I mean, it's like, it's poison. You know, most populations are lactose intolerant. So, you know, look at the state-sponsored sickness program in the schools, all meat and dairy. You know, I mean, that's...
I've heard her say that she eats the healthy breakfast she was on The View, but she said, my husband always has to have his bacon.
Yeah.
But she ought to try faking bacon or something.
So that, to me, then, kind of ruins his credibility a bit. Well, as president in general, I would like somebody who at least knows how to feed him or herself, or him or her family.
Yes.
So I don't quite see him as a credible president, just kind of based on that. Also, I'm a bit disappointed in his policies. You know, for somebody who won the Nobel Peace Prize, he's sure conducting a lot of war as a peace prize winner. I didn't really expect him to be pro-nuke and pro-drilling, and you know, just basically, I don't really see the difference from what would have happened if Sarah Palin had been elected. Only there'd be strong opposition to her policies, but with Obama, since he's supposed to be one of us, then we all go along with it. Just like with HSUS, which is supposed to be one of us, then we go along with it. It's okay, you know, that we only work for a perch for a chicken instead of the liberation of the chicken.
Bob, are there politicians that you actually are in agreement with that we can support?
Dennis Kucinich. I'm going to write him in from now on. Dennis Kucinich. His wife, Elizabeth Kucinich, works with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine on food issues, especially related to public schools. And I would have voted for Cindy Sheehan in her political bid. So let's see. I think we have the campaign to abolish meat. You can help my radio show. We can create events. I mean, I'm willing to work on creating the film festival again here in San Francisco. It would be nice to have a parade for the animals across the Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, all of this is possible if we generate the funds to do it, you know, and that's what it takes. So I would have preferred all the energy that went into Prop 2. If people had put that energy into raising money for Go Vegan Radio, the show would be on 50 radio stations for years. You know, 100 radio stations for years, reaching people with a vegan message. So, but any campaign that would say, don't mention anything about being vegan, well, that's not my team.
What's the latest on this ban of shark fin?
Shark fin, it was passed in the legislature. I don't know.
It's on the desk.
It's on the desk to be signed, right?
Yeah,
Right?
until next Monday.
So does it have to be signed by next Monday, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a measure that's going to take years. Years.
Will it? Is it supposed to take years to go into effect?
It goes into effect somewhat in January of next year, and that they're supposed to stop getting new shark fins, but then it gives them a year and a half after that to get rid of what they got.
Mhm.
Although the bill, there's a whole other bill that was introduced that actually amended it, that weakened it, and it's on his desk too. Yeah, there's a list at the booth, the Animal Support booth. We're asking people, ask the governor to sign the shark fin bill and veto the other one.
So this is Virginia Handley. Oh, are we done? I just started. What are you talking about? So,
Okay. Wind down and I have an announcement.
oh really? Okay. So this is Virginia Handley, who works on legislative issues, and she has a table inside, so you can check with her on that. I see Kenneth Williams came in, my good friend here, so if anybody's interested in like, oh, I can't be vegan because I'd be weak and puny, and I mean, he's a vegan bodybuilder, champion vegan bodybuilder right here.
Awesome.
But we have Matt Danzig, who's the who won the United UFC fight championship. I mean, athletes are learning. You know, Mike Tyson went vegan. You know, like,
What about the 3 largest, most powerful animals?
that's right.
Vegan.
Yeah, there you
You
go.
know, the elephant and the bull and the gorilla.
Exactly. So, and you're all welcome to take this because it has the information here on what you can put on doorknobs. Look at these statistics here. They're mind-boggling. And you know what? You know, I'm talking about a campaign to abolish meat, for example. So what if San Francisco went totally vegan? Guess what? Well, look, just in the Bay Area alone,
Yeah.
we would save in healthcare, heart disease, cancer, we would save $19 billion a year, and in San Francisco alone, over $2 billion a year.
And we're we're starting off with the meat-free Mondays, so if anybody wants to help us with that, you know, we gotta start somewhere.
Oh yeah, meat-free Mondays, and I'm here for meat-free Tuesdays through Sundays.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, so here are things you can grab.